Hi everyone, my name is Lainey, and today we're going to be talking about a study proposing teaching coping mechanisms to forced migrants. So, this is a pretty interesting statistic. One out of every three asylum seekers and refugees experience high rates of depression, anxiety, and post traumatic stress disorders, according to the American Psychiatric Association. So, as you can see, it's a pretty serious problem. It's pretty pervasive within the immigrant and refugee community, and we're going to see what we can do about it. So before we get into the actual meat and content of the study, I want to go through some definitions. A migrant, for the purposes of this presentation, is going to be one who changes their country of residence regardless of reason. And so this includes refugees, documented and undocumented immigrants. For coping mechanisms, that's going to be referring to the skills and strategies used to decrease unpleasant feelings due to negative circumstances. Post-migration stress, that is going to be used a lot throughout this presentation, and that is referring to the trauma, anxiety, and depression that can set in after migrating due to extreme circumstances and a lack of support. And for locus of control, that is referring to the extent to which an individual believes they have control over their life and what happens to them. And so this is a spectrum. If you're on the internal side of if you have an internal locus of control, you believe that all circumstances are out of your control and that everything happens to you. But if you have an external locus of control, you believe that you can impact your circumstances and that you have an effect. Yes. So why does this matter? Why are we talking about it? First off, demographic size, immigrants make up 13.6% of the population, which is a pretty large percentage. And so, this is having a big impact on a lot of Americans. And so we need to figure out, we need to, do research and figure out what's going on with that. Number two, healthier adaptations. Migrants with support tend to have better and healthier adaptations in psychological health than migrants without support and without any host culture support. In addition, this just expands the field of research. When we have a better understanding of problems, that translates to higher quality treatments and care. And so this is allowing us to better care for our immigrant and refugee neighbors. So there's already a pretty dense body of previous research done on this. In 2020, John Gould's sermon defined belonging to include civic, social, emotional, and security components. And in 2021, Safdar studied the psychological health of immigrants and found that those with high psychological strength tend to be physically healthier and vice versa. So if you are psychologically weak and have anxiety and depression and PTSD, you tend to be physically unhealthier too. In 2019, Hahn discovered that refugees with an external locus tend to handle stress better than those with an internal locus of control. And as far as host culture support goes, supportive host countries are associated with lower levels of post-migration stress. These things are all great, but what my body of research is trying to include and add is detailing the relationship between the locus of control, host culture support, and life satisfaction. There's been a bunch of research on these things individually, but nothing really tying them together and looking for a causal relationship. So we're going to be bridging that gap by asking the question, does providing education on healthy coping mechanisms reduce post-traumatic stress symptoms and increase satisfaction of life through externalizing the locus of control? That's a big question, but basically what we're asking is, does education from host group support, so does that host group support through education, is that able to decrease possible negative psychological side effects and increase satisfaction of life? And is that able to externalize the locus of control? Are we able to teach that? And our hypothesis is that yes, you can. Our hypothesis is migrant participants who take the coping mechanisms course will have higher life satisfaction, lower levels of post-migration stress, and an external locus of control compared to our control group. So our study design has 4 components. It has an experiment, causal claim, population, and sampling methods. So those are things that we're going to go through. So for our experimental design, This is going to be a longitudinal study. Participants will be observed over the 4-month long experiment. 3 of these months will be in the course slash being on the waiting list. We're going to have two groups. We're going to have an experimental group of randomly selected participants taking the course and a control group of randomly selected participants on a waitlist for the course. It would be unethical to not give any kind of treatment to the control group, which is why they're on a waitlist for the course, just as an explanation of why, yeah, they're on a waitlist. We're also going to be using a pre-test, post-test model. Both groups will be tested before, during, and after, and 1 month after the course ends to account for initial differences. And this experiment is going to be researching a causal claim. It's seeking to find if coping mechanism education can externalize locus of control and increase life satisfaction and psychological health. So for our population and our sampling techniques, we're going to be using 500 refugees and forced migrants between the ages of 18 and 50. We're going to be seeking to find them in Midwest cities, so specifically the cities of Detroit, Lansing, Chicago, and Minneapolis, because these are pretty densely populated with immigrants. And we're going to be using a matched pairs technique to account for the third variable of perceived acceptance. The participants will be screened using the Outgroup Support Social Scale, which is basically going to screen for how comfortable and accepted they feel in their host culture, and then we'll be using a matched pairs form of that, using matched pairs to align them up into groups. We'll also be using stratified sampling, which is going to equally and randomly distribute a variety of ethnicities, religions, and education levels across the groups to get some diversity in each group. All right, now we're going to get into operationalizing our variables. And for our independent variable, that looks like randomly assigning participants either to the coping mechanisms course or to the wait list. And the specific course content is going to be taught by a certified educator and built on lectures, activities, and discussions based on the principles documented in the Health Theory of Coping by Stallman in 2020. For our dependent variable, we're going to be looking at how participants score on the life satisfaction, locus of control, and post-migration stress surveys. And the responses will be compared to match pairs and charted for growth and change across the longitudinal study. For our dependent variables specifics, we're going to be using the Refugee Post-Migration Stress Scale to measure post-traumatic stress. We're going to be using satisfaction with life scale to measure life satisfaction, and we're going to be using the locus of control scale to measure the locus of control. And so this is where we get to our little flow chart. We're going to start off with random stratified sampling with our 500 participants, and then we are going to screen them using the social support scale in matched groups, and we're going to randomly assign them. And then from there, we're going to have our pre-test surveys, and then we are going to do the first half of the course, either in the coping mechanisms course or on the wait list, the first half of the study. And then at the halfway point, we're going to have a halfway survey for both of groups, and they're going to continue either taking the course or being on the wait list. And then after the course ends, we're going to have a post-test survey, and then 1 month after that, we're actually going to have a 1 month after survey. So some implications, if our hypothesis is correct that these results could be used to start and revamp education programs for immigrants and refugees that focus on trauma recovery through coping mechanisms. But it should be noted that there is an external validity limitation because all of this experiment was done solely in Midwest U.S. cities, and so it shouldn't be extrapolated to cities and cultures that are dissimilar to these cultures. There also could be a measurement error because there's a possibility of social desirability and participants answering like they think that their instructors would like them to answer, or not taking the surveys at the correct times. So that should be taken into consideration. So just kind of to conclude and wrap things up a bit, this study intends to provide a better understanding on how host culture support, locus of control, and psychological health coincide with each other so we can better support our immigrants and our refugee neighbors. Thank you all for your time. Here are a list of the references. Thank you so much. Bye.